Circular living comes from circular economics. So we're going to start out looking at linear versus circular economics. Then I'm going to share with you some things that are going on around the globe and in Colorado about implementing and moving towards circular economics. Then I have some ideas to share about what we can do as individuals, and then we'll open it up to question and comment and anything else you want to share. So I'm going to start with a very basic model here. This is what we consider our conventional economy, modern economy, linear economy. It's very simplistic, but you'll see as it starts on the left with resource extraction. Basically, we gather resources and raw materials. We can think petroleum, minerals, metals, wood, things like that. They're combined, they're manipulated into what we call products. The products are distributed to different markets where we buy and sell them, and then they're disposed. I wanted to bring in the idea of externalities. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Externalities really captivated me as an idea because they're all the things that are outside the price of anything that's bought and sold. And they're defined here as costs or benefits to a third party not directly related to a transaction. But it's something that is important because we can think about how many things happen that are not reflected in a price we might pay. So a couple examples to help with that. A farmer is next door to a beekeeper, and the farmer gets great pollination because the bees pollinate his crops. That would be a positive externality. The farmer isn't paying for those bees. Something on the flip side, we may read about factories that are putting out air pollution or water pollution. Those would be negative externalities because we don't pay any price for cleaning the air or the water. So an externality is anything outside the product price and the transaction. I would also invite us to think about trash because we pay our trash collector or our recycling collector separate from any product that we buy. So essentially we're supporting a different business, and the price of that doesn't relate to the products that we're actually purchasing. So what does the circular economy look like? What is that model? And what you'll see here is it starts in the same place. In the upper left corner, we have raw material, we have resource collection from the earth materials. Design is the next phase in this diagram. That's a really meaningful part of circular economics, and I'm going to come back to that. Then we have the production cycle or the production stage, and then things come to market. We buy them, consume them, and then in a circular economy, the big difference is that whatever products we're no longer using that we can't refurbish or repair, those are created back into raw materials to feed that system. So the ideal is that we take earth materials once, and then everything just keeps cycling back through creating new products, back through consumption, back into creating new products again. That's the ideal. So let's look at a couple of definitions. Circular economics is a really big discussion in global communities, particularly in the European Union, in the United Nations. This first definition is from Ellen MacArthur, who is considered a thought leader in the circular economic conversation. And I want to just share with you, she's a yachtswoman, and she made her name, her notoriety, sailing around the world solo, which she did in 71 days, which set the world record in 2005, and her record wasn't broken until 2020. So in her sailing around the world by herself for 71 days, she became somehow transfixed on the way the earth works and has now committed her life to furthering circular economic ideas. She started her foundation to basically share these ideas and bring them into a larger audience. And she defines the circular economy as one where it's a system where materials never become waste and nature is regenerated. This second quote definition is from a Belgian research and development company or foundation, and they're looking at a circular economy as a way to live within the safe limits of the planet. So there are a couple of key ideas that I want to draw our attention to here. Materials never become waste, which we talked about, or I mentioned when we were trying to turn our products back into raw materials again. And then the second piece is considering what nature can generate or regenerate naturally. And these ideas have been taken another step, and there are research groups that have taken our consumption as a global population, and they'll also look at it on a per country basis. And then they compare that with what the Earth generates or regenerates on an annual basis. Where these two meet, they call overshoot. And the overshoot day is basically where humanity consumes what the Earth can generate in a year. And we have gotten to a place where our consumption is exceeding what the Earth can generate in a year. So let's look at some of that data. And these are going to be a little intimidating. I'm sorry about that. This first graph, what it shows us is that in 1971, which is the far left date, humanity was consuming about what the Earth could generate in a year. We were consuming that in a year. And our consumption has accelerated so that now by 2024, 2025, we're using up an annual allocation of resources by August 1st. That's what this first graph shows us. Some of these groups have taken this a step further, and that was a global population. Here what they've done is they've said, okay, if everybody in the world consumed like this country, we would use up the Earth's resources by this date. And on the far right side is the earlier dates. Qatar won the prize for that. If everyone in the world, every country in the world consumed like Qatar, we would use up the Earth's annual generation or ability to provide resources by February 11th, so a month from today. If everyone did it like the US, we would last another month. If everyone did it like Jamaica, we would last until mid-November. So you see a huge disparity, a huge difference in the amount and the rate at which different countries are consuming resources. On the right side, it's primarily North America, European, there's some Asian countries, a couple of Middle Eastern oil countries. As you go down to the mid-range, you're looking more at, again, more European, but we move more into South America. And then the countries that are much lower on the consumption are tend to be South American and smaller Asian countries. This is pretty hard data to pull apart. And so what I wanted to say now is whether or not we buy this, whether or not we think this is a legitimate way of even thinking about things, I think it's an invitation to really consider consumption and the Earth's natural abilities to sustain human consumption. I thought it would, or I wanted to shift gears just a little bit. This is a quote that I think it helped me see that this isn't really just an economic discussion, because there may be really human consequences as well. And what Martin Tack, who's from Denmark, what he says invites us to do that. Circular economy is not the goal itself, it's a solution. And it's a solution to economic equity, social breakdowns, and environmental issues. So people are seeing that some of these economic things are actually impacting us in ways that we don't think about. So that would be human externalities to the economic conversation. And I'll share an anecdotal example. I had a chance encounter with someone who was a contractor and was recycling a bunch of cardboard from flat screen TVs. And he shared that he had just installed 17 flat screen TVs in a single family home. And he was kind of in shock about this. And after that initial impact, if we sit there and we think about it, the question that came up for me was, how are these people in this household relating to one another? What is their quality time? If they have 17 TVs, are they all watching TV? I don't know. And I don't mean to go into any judgment, but it does point me to there may be social consequences in addition, which is what Martin Tack is pointing us to. So that's the international picture. What are we doing in this country? Well, the Environmental Protection Agency has some goals and ambitions around creating circular economy in the US. They call a circular economy one that keeps materials and products in circulation for as long as possible. And they have a 4-point approach. I've summarized those, and the emphasis here is mine. The first is it's a systems approach. It's very much a comprehensive, not an individualized look. They're trying to look at a broader picture. The next point is industrial processes and economic activities are restorative or regenerative in nature. I mentioned when we looked at that circular economy diagram, design is a key piece of this, and it comes in up front, where both the industrial processes that are producing and manufacturing are designed to be more sustainable, and the products themselves are designed to be more sustainable, last longer, be repairable, and also be returned into the raw materials I mentioned. The third point, resources used in such processes and activities maintain their highest value for as long as possible. I just mentioned that. And finally, eliminate waste through superior design. Okay, so that's the national overarching US umbrella. There are a handful of states that have state initiatives to move to a more circular economic model, and we're one of them. Last year, Colorado started a state initiative, and it's headed up by a division they call themselves C3 Enterprise, and C3 is Colorado Circular Communities. That's why they call it C3, quite a bit shorter, paired with a foundation, and I'll come to that in a minute. The definition or vision they're working with is a Colorado where every community thrives within a fully integrated circular economy. Waste is minimized, resources are continuously reused locally, and economic opportunities are enhanced through sustainable and equitable practices. So I just will call your attention to a couple things that are a little new here. We've seen the waste point already, but the next one, and I actually underlined the wrong word, the word that jumped out at me was the local emphasis. They're really looking at how to create local community economies, which makes a lot of sense in Colorado because we have very rural communities and we have very dense urban ones. That local emphasis is a unique piece here. And the other thing is they're seeing the economic opportunities, they're seeing a lot of job potential, actual innovation in using materials for new products. So like one example was a man who was investigating and doing experiments around taking used tire to create road base. So C3 Enterprise is working with this nonprofit that's set up through the state that actually is giving grants for people who have innovative ideas and turning reused materials into new products. I thought maybe at this point it would be good to inject a little humor, so I've included one of my favorite cartoonists, Gary Larson, And, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity. I think before we embrace a new mindset, it's really useful to understand or at least question, for me, what my assumptions might be. So this picture is of two stags, and one of them has two circles on his chest, which are in the form of a target, and his buddy is saying, "Bummer of a birthmark, Hal." And so I think when I question myself about language I hear, things I hear, and assumptions I might make about circles, I thought about, well, if I'm driving in circles, I'm probably lost. If I'm talking in circles right here, I might be confused. But there are really good things about circles. The mandala is an easy visual. Mile High, we all talk about unity and wholeness. That's more of a circular kind of image. And then finally, at Sacred Earth Ministry, we're extremely committed to learning from this circle that we all live on. And so I'm going to just invite us all to consider that it really starts with a mindset. And learning from the earth is a powerful thing. You know, Josh talked this morning about the expansiveness of trying to connect with divinity. And I find myself wondering if the earth is here in part, and we're here in part to learn from it because it is so expansive. A couple things that have brought that home for me was working with some soil scientists who were in regenerative agriculture, and they talked about how a teaspoon of healthy soil has as many living organisms in it as there are human beings on the planet. And they're really just beginning to understand and know some of the things that are going on in the earth. So she's an amazing teacher for us about circularity, I would say, and offers us really the chance to embrace the unknown. Dacher Keltner looked at this as awe and wonder and what that does for us. And certainly there are a lot of things about the unknown that we could take as scary, but I'm going to invite us to say that not knowing everything is actually really exciting. There are two systems that the earth offers us right away that we can learn from. And the first one is interconnectivity, connections between things. Everything is connected to other things. Nothing operates alone, with the one arguable exception of human beings. Interdependence is the second cycle that I'll draw our attention to, and that's about mutual dependence. Everything is dependent on other things. So I thought a couple examples might be helpful here. When Mile High removed the ash trees a little bit ago because of the disease and the emerald ash borer, I was in my mindset around this talk, and I looked up the predators of those beetles, and they're wasps and woodpeckers. So the interconnectivity is between the beetles, the trees, the wasps, and the woodpeckers. And the wasps and the woodpeckers have other sources of food, so they're not interdependent, but they're definitely interconnected. You know, when I was talking to a friend of mine about these two words and cycles, and she said, you know, are they really the same thing? And there's a lot of overlap, but they're not the same. My daughter and I are extremely close and very, very connected, and we are physically totally independent. She lives on her own. I am very dependent on my grocery store and arguably not very connected. So, subtle differences, but I think both those words might be a mantra we can use in a little bit here. I don't think it would be a Mile High talk without a quote from Ernest Holmes. These are two quotes actually from the same place in the same essay, The Individual and the Universal, from Living the Science of Mind. In the first part, he said, there's no such thing as an individual anything in the universe, which just points to the two words I gave us, interconnectivity and interdependence. And then the second part is only the choice of thinking is dependent upon the thinker. So if you take nothing away from this talk today except choosing a mindset consciously, then that will be a great advance for all of us. I'm going to quote someone else here that many may have heard of, Robin Wall Kimmerer. People are familiar with her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. This is from her newer book that just came out last year called The Serviceberry, Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World. And she says, invites us to recognize enoughness, which she said is a radical act in an economy that's always urging us to consume more. So when I thought about this quote, I dove into a little bit of research around advertising, because I'm very aware of advertising. You know, it's coming up on everything I do on my computer more and more, and they're getting very innovative. And I'm very grateful that there's such a life-sustaining outlet for creative, innovative thinking, artistic people. And that's a $455, almost $456 billion a year industry. So there's a lot of money going into getting us to spend and buy and consume. I'm going to look at another quote here from Robin Wall Kimmerer that points back to what the Danish policy advisor invited us to consider. Robin says, how we think influences how we behave. Thinking about raw materials being converted into something we value has extractive implications, and taking without giving back has an emotional cost. Conceiving of something as a gift changes our relationship with it in a profound way, even if the thing is the same. In that initial diagram of a linear economy, sometimes it's referred to as a traditional economy. And I deliberately avoided that word for the main reason that the traditional economy is what Robin's pointing us to here, was a gift economy. Everything that humans received was a gift, and that was the traditional way. So when we hear anyone use that word, I think it's an invitation to remember how we can think about things as a gift, which to me was a pretty powerful mindset shift. So now I'll give us some practical things we can think about and do. We can think about what we want versus what we need. We can apply interconnectivity and interdependence and use those two cycles as invitations to think about other things we can be grateful for and other things that are happening that are externalities that are outside the price we pay. So, for example, but let's say I buy coffee and I'm grateful for my coffee, and I think about who packaged it, who got it to the store, who harvested the beans, who grew those beans, what insects and soil organisms and living things supported the growth of those beans, and where's the farmer. So that's just a way of showing how we can think about interconnectivity and interdependence to expand what we can be grateful for. If I think about all of you, and I'm grateful that you all showed up, I'm thankful for the cars that you have, however you got here, for the gas station where you were able to fill your car with gas, for the people who got that gas to this station. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just using interconnectivity and interdependence to expand and to really expand my own gratitude. Next, I have more for your money. So this is in quotes because we might hear it a lot, and I think it's a good thing to question it. If I can buy 10 of something for the price of 3, but I really only need 2, is that a good deal? I don't know. We can look for products made from recycled materials and buy secondhand. We can give before we get, donate. We can really ask ourselves, is new and improved better or am I better off with repair and refurbish? So I have kind of a painful personal example on this one. We were selling our house and the buyer fell through, in part because it had an old furnace in it. Well, we had never had any trouble with this furnace. It was reliable as anything, but I kind of panicked, and so we replaced the furnace. And I was talking to a contractor afterwards, and he said, you know, that furnace was 50 years old, and it would have lasted another 50. He said, they just don't make things like they used to. And that was a very poignant place for me to stop and say, you know, am I buying something because it's cheap, or am I buying it thinking it's going to last longer, it's better made, whatever? And so new and improved, I think, is a good question to ask ourselves. We can share. I'm hoping we'll share ideas here in a minute, and I'm hoping everyone in this room finds somebody in their life that they can share ideas with around moving their mindset to more of a circular one. There are a lot of product sharing things that are happening. Everything from a leaf blower or a snow blower, ride share, that kind of thing. Before COVID, there was a wonderful shop that had artisan equipment, and the artisans could all come in and share equipment for whatever they were creating. The big areas are food, clothing, household items, and construction. At Sacred Earth Ministry, we're having a lot of conversations about food, and I hope all of you will come to our February meeting on the 19th. Sorry, it's not a meeting, it's a movie, and it's really a fun and a very poignant, powerful one about food and waste of food on the front end. Think small and local, not quick and easy. If you look back to the Colorado vision for a circular economy, the local piece is a really important one. When we buy locally, we're supporting jobs locally. That money is staying in our local economy. But if I'm invested in the quick and easy kind of consumption, am I giving myself more time, or I am just feeding that acceleration? I just invite us to think about that. Start a circle, join a circle. Find somebody you can say, you know what, I want to try this in our household, and will you do it with me, or can we share ideas? Weeks ago, when I was thinking through this talk with a couple of images of carrots, do the carrot, not the stick. Whatever you try, just give yourself credit for it and play with it. Have fun. I grew up in a Catholic environment, and I know guilt pretty well. Don't do it. That is not what we're doing here. So a couple of games that we played in our household was with the trash. We're throwing out a bag of trash every week. Can we make that bag last a week and a half, 2 weeks? There was one game we played. We also played a game, Buy Nothing New. There are lots of games out there. That's again where you can join with other people, friends, neighbors, family, and play a game together. So I'm going to leave us, hopefully give you 3 takeaways for today. First, it really is a mindset. Notice your mindset, make adjustments where you want. The gratitude piece is huge. It's part of what we do at Mile High, and use interconnection and interdependence as a way to expand gratitude for any little thing. And finally, be a ripple, be that pebble in a pond, because if each of every one of us in this room does one little thing, we can create this, where it's all ripples. So that's what I've got. Does anyone have questions or comments?